You're listening to a Keokuk Area History Syndicate production.
Gordy, if you don't mind telling me, tell me about your childhood, where you were born, fond memories, formative experiences.
Well, I was born here in Keokuk in 1946, which in July, which makes me fairly old. But we grew up at Peter's Dairy, which was across the field from the racetrack here in Keokuk, and a lot of drivers left their cars there during the week at the dairy, and they'd come out and work on them. And so we just kind of grew up around racing. I can probably remember back in the early 50s of going over to Bushnell, Illinois to a race. And the two things I remember out of that race, I would have been 8 or 9 at the time, was a driver named Wildman Kelly, and another guy there had a car that supposedly had an airplane engine in it. It made a lot of noise, but it didn't go anywhere. but that's what I remember. And then in 53, they opened the first track here out at Runge, out on Carbide Lane. And then that was open for a couple of years. And then in 55, they built Sportsman's Park, which was on Peter's property. And like I said, it was across the field, and guys drove their cars back and forth through the road going over to the track. And during the week, a lot of times, there would be nobody around, and my brother and I tested some of those cars out around Peter's Dairy. It was kind of D-shaped. And I remember one day that they had blacktopped Hilton Road at the time. And I looped it out there and left some black marks and ended up in the bushes up by the dairy, but it didn't anything. But we were out there with soap and water trying to wash those black marks off before Dad got home. But I remember Dad coming home. Dad never said a word, but I imagine he knew.
I doubt if you got all the marks off.
Yeah, no, we didn't get any of them off. No. But that was kind of some of the first memories. And then I drove my first race when I was 13, and Dad had gone and signed for my brother, and he'd said he'd just, go ahead and sign for me while he was at it. So,
your brother was older?
Yeah, he's much older. He's a year and a half older than I.
Oh, okay. Much older, yeah.
Yeah, much older.
In the world of brothers, that is considerable.
Yeah.
Eons.
Yeah. Well, I can say one thing. I never picked a fight with my brother. I was smarter than that.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. And anyway, my first race, they had a practice over there. And we had an old Hudson, and back then they had what they called an H bar. You just put 2 bars up behind the driver's seat and then one behind to fasten the belts to. And I had an old Hudson, and it was over there, and they had to have all the glass out. Didn't have any goggles, so I was going around there and squinting my eyes and mouth, and then dust flying, dirt. And thankfully, a rod went out of that motor. And then we built an old DeSoto, and the first day I run that, I was 14 then.
How fast are these cars going?
Pardon me?
How fast are these cars going when you were racing as a child?
Well, probably about 80 miles an hour.
Okay.
On a quarter-mile track, they fast enough that if you hit something, it could hurt. Anyway, I flipped that car end over end, and my mom wouldn't even go to a race. She was kind of upset with my dad a little bit. But anyway.
Were you hurt?
No. I was very lucky because I never really got hurt. Even a couple. I hit the wall head on over Milwaukee. about 120 miles an hour. And then the next week, we had a big crash at Springfield, Illinois, and I was running third. I had already pitted, and the other two guys weren't. And I was really running good, and saw a little dust up there, and they got into middle of turn 3, and there's a car pointed right at me, and another one pointed up towards the outside wall. They'd tangled, and I don't even think I got off the gas. I don't even think I got my foot on the brake when I hit them.
Oh my gosh.
And that stretched the old body quite a bit. I actually kissed the steering wheel, and that's with the belts as tight as you can get them. And
I was there that day.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of cars in that wreck.
13.
I mean, it took out a ton of cars.
Yeah, 13 of
and
us.
the Springfield track over at Springfield, Illinois, it's a mile track.
Yes.
So you're really moving it.
Yeah, we run about 120 or so down the straightaways there. And anyway, I went back we had an old bus we pulled a race car with, and I got in it. My chest was hurting because that was 2 hard hits 2 weeks in a row. And so I breathed real fast, and then I held my breath. And I hyperventilated, and if you've ever done that, it scares the snot out of you because you just can't breathe.
Yeah.
So I went and told him, and it's the only time I went to the hospital. By the time I got there, well, to make a long story shorter, while I was in the ambulance getting ready to go, they got a call, and some guy got worked over with a chain. And they went over there, and they wanted to know if it was okay to take him to the hospital, too. And I said, well, yeah, he needs to go out a lot worse than I do. And so anyway, by the time I got to the hospital, I knew I was okay. But, pretty sore. On the way home, I told the wife, I said, I had 2 cars, and when I hit over to Milwaukee, I cut the front off the other one and put on the better car, and then in the wreck down there, I was out of stuff. So I told her we were quitting. By the time I got home, I decided I was going to ask Ramo if I could borrow one of his cars or rent one, and he said no, but I could use one. I said, well, what happens if I wreck it? And he said, well, I guess it'll be wrecked. That's the way Ramo was.
Ramo Stott.
Yeah. Well, we go way, way back. He and his wife played cards with my mom and dad over to Derry and stuff years and years before. So they just have a long history of that. Anyway,
let me ask you. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit because you talked about that one where you were going end over end. That was your first major accident.
Yeah.
And your mom was upset.
Well,
so what allowed you to keep going?
Well, when she saw us working on the car and laughing and stuff, then she was in. She never missed a race after that. And
she knew it was your passion, something that you loved.
Yeah. In 1967, I got this nice letter from the Army. Said that they'd like me to go be with them. So I got drafted in 69, and I actually got out 3 months early. In 67, I got drafted. In May of 69, I got out early to go racing as seasonable occupation. We were all sitting around over in the barracks one day, and somebody was talking about something. And I said, you know what? And back then, you wrote letters home. I wrote a letter to my mom. She got older. Raymond, he wrote a letter that he made his living in the summertime racing. So I actually got out 3 months early to go racing. And that was in 69. But I started, probably my first race would have been in 60 or 61. 60, I know I made an old car, and they had a drag strip over there. I won a couple trophies with that. And then in 61, when I think they just reopened the circle track. They closed for a few years. And they opened that back up, and I ran there until I got 65. And then I built a Henry J and put a 426 Chrysler motor in it. And back then there was no rules except you had to have 4 tires.
You could put a motor out of one car.
An airplane
Yeah, oh yeah,
motor,
I had
like you
a
said,
Henry J. Actually sat beside the motor. Had a 12-inch drive shaft in it.
You're probably not familiar with Henry J's, but it's a pretty small car.
Yeah.
Pretty small car, and that's a huge motor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're super.
And it was wicked fast. In fact, that's the fastest car I ever had on short tracks.
Can I ask? You were 13 when you started racing. Was that normal? Were other kids your age racing, or was it just you and a bunch of older men?
It was me and a bunch of older men.
And how did they take that? Were they like, okay, you can
They
do
didn't
it?
take it well.
Tell her about the championship at Sportsman's Park. They didn't take that real well, did they?
No.
You 18, he won the track championship.
17.
17.
Just turned 17.
Won the track championship out here at
Yeah,
Sportsman's Park.
yeah.
Because you were just the kid that was watching them work on the cars, and then all of a sudden you're winning the races.
Well, it was a little more than that. When the kid watched them work on them, I was working on them. And I have pictures of me, crawled in under the car, changing the drive shaft or something. But we'd put bolts in, we'd put transmission in, and then Dad would have to come home and tighten the bolts.
Because you weren't strong enough to do
No, we didn't. We get them all the bolts in, and
That's amazing.
but Jack Tucker had won the race. He was driving. He and my dad owned a car together, and they won. They got tore down one night, and they were talking about the floorboards only had 3 bolts in them, and then I picked up the name of Gordon Tight because I didn't put all the bolts in. I was 9 or 10 years old.
So you had just turned 17 and you won this race, and you were saying the sentiment of you racing and kicking these guys to the curb was not received well.
No, it wasn't. In fact, I drove a car. Something broke in my car, and I drove Leela Masters' car. And I was coming in for the white flag, and the motor locked up. And I remember getting out and stomping it had an open top, and I got out of the top, and I stomped on the trunk. Anyway, one of the racers from Illinois come by, and he said, well, I was really glad to see that happen. Which, went over real well. And he said, you just get in those old cars and you just run them as hard as they go. And I didn't say anything, but that's what the purpose was, to try and win.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was way out in front, had the race won. Motor locked up, coming in for white flag. And
Yeah, that's not very good sportsmanship. I was glad to see that.
well, there
happen.
wasn't good sportsmanship.
Yeah.
Back in those days, there was a lot of fist throwing.
Might have been called Sportsman's Park, but it really was.
No, there was a lot of fist fighting and stuff went on, and racing. You see a little bit today on TV, but back in the day there was a lot of it. Of course, me being a little squirt, nobody bothered me because my dad was big and tough. And we were up Fort Madison one night, and I sold my car and I drove another one and won the trophy dash 4 laps by half a lap. And they decided they were going to throw us out. And I remember my Uncle Lee was about as tough as my dad. And they said, well, why don't you guys just come up by the outer gate here and you won't have so far to throw. But nobody went. But anyway,
consideration.
But anyway, that was the end of that for us, because they were, like I said, we were my brother and I were winning a lot. And I was 17 or 18, and like I said, he's much older. He'd have been close to 20.
How did you finally get the respect of these other guys? Was it just you were winning and they had to stomach it and figure it out, or was there a moment?
Well, I actually, in 65, when I started racing Memphis and Kirksville, I was 18 or 19 then, and I got some respect because we were basically starting over. Nobody knew us or anything. And then when I got out of the Army in 69, I started running in IMCA. Didn't know any of those guys, and we raced tracks all over. We didn't race the same track. So you really didn't get to know anybody well. So that went really pretty well. And then in 1978, I put Jesus Saves on the side of my race car, and which was kind of unheard of in those days. And but I was well respected for that. And then we started having prayer at the driver's meeting, and
you were the chaplain for.
Yes, I got. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they made me I got upset with Billy Saxon. He was the promoter or the kind of the boss at USAC. And I went and got a Bible at the church that they gave away to people, and I stomped over there, and the closer I got to where Billy was, the milder I got. And instead of chewing on him, I said I'd like to have a book from my sponsor. And he was really thrilled, said he didn't have a Bible, and that was going to be his family Bible. And I walked away feeling really good without having to tell him off, I mean, and Billy and I had mutual respect for one another after that. And then I ran we went to Daytona in 81, and I started running some ARCA races, and they made me chaplain there. And then in, I don't remember if it was 81 or 82, we were running at Talladega, and there was 13 of us running laps average of 213 mile an hour in the draft. And the kid I was running behind, I had motor trouble and dropped out, but 15 minutes later he was dead. And I'm sitting there with a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we decided we weren't going to run the super speedways anymore. Although I did go back to Texas once, which was a 2-mile track, and I had some lightweight wheels, and going down the straightaway there at about 200 mile an hour, the left front wheel passes me. Goes on. And couldn't turn the car in the wall, and you'd always heard about things going into slow motion. I swear I could have read a book before I got to the wall. I remember bracing myself and thinking, man, this is probably going to hurt. Went up and smacked the wall, spun around and down to the infield there a couple of times, and said, well, that wasn't so bad. And I just bumped my knee a little bit on the shifter.
Wow.
But anyway, we didn't go back anymore.
To those high
super speedway. Yeah.
Talladaga's probably, I would say,
the
most dangerous from track.
Yeah.
It's really big.
Can I ask, as someone who's unfamiliar, a noob of the highest degree, you were driving cars that you had worked on. Did that continue for these high-speed races? I
built my own cars.
You did, the whole time? So
Yeah.
It wasn't like NASCAR where people have like all these sponsorships slapped on?
Well, I had bought an old factory car, but one of the biggest breaks I got was in 69 at the end of the season. Ramo made a call. I got on at Nichols Engineering, where they built Chrysler race cars. and I worked over there for 6 months. And that was really, really huge for me because I saw how they built them and what they were doing, but how a little bit of grinding here and a little bit of grinding there and a little paint just made things look so much nicer and stuff. But I started, but my Murata that I built in 1980 was pretty much homegrown. And it was, in fact, it runs so fast that in 84, USAC outlawed it.
Really?
Yeah. They said that you could run 400 and you could run 440 cubic inches, but you couldn't run a big block. And I was running a Hemi.
Was that targeted towards you, or were there
Oh
other
no,
drivers?
my car.
Yeah.
100%. So I went to the driver's meeting in Indianapolis and popped in there, and the owner of Dean Roper's car, they'd won 3 championships in a row. And they said, you know good and well, if you get all your problems worked out, we'll all be running for second. That's how fast that car was. And anyway, and then at the end of 84, ARCA had changed their rules too, and so there was no place to run, and I didn't have the money to start over, and I was tired and stuff, so we kind of called it until I think it was 99. I took that Murata and cut it down and made it into a Dodge Dart and put a 440 in it, but I never did get it to really run till the last night I ran it. I had figured out what the problem was, and I was leading the heat race, pulling away, and the motor went away, and I never put it back together. We were running a 4-cylinder, and Gordy Jr. was winning everywhere we went, and we were having too much fun with that. In fact, we won 19 out of 20 heat races in 2006, and Vernon wheel bearing out of the other one. So.
And that was at Lee County Speedway.
Well, we were running Memphis and Lee County and over at a couple specials at Bloomfield.
Earlier on, you were mentioning how Ramo was racing during the summer and getting some money. It was kind of a summer gig. At what point did this turn into, or did it ever turn into, a full-time thing for you? Was it just like getting money in the summer and then you were working on the side, or how did that? Well,
I told my wife a while back that, in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, that I need to retire. She says, you can't retire, you've never had a job. So, no, I did some work on the side, but we pretty much got by on what the race car made. Didn't get rich. There wasn't any money in it like there is today. But I enjoyed doing it, and the biggest disappointment for me was having to quit racing. And for a little bit, I felt like I'd let our Lord down, because it couldn't go on. But knowing a little later, I know that he was pleased with what I had done.
So this almost felt like a spiritual mission, or that you were called to this.
Yes, I felt 100% called.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? If you're comfortable.
Well, no, I have no problem with that. It's just we had started church in 75, and then in 77 we had changed churches and started another one, and then that's when the Lord started dealing with me. But I'll go way back to when I was 16 and laying in bed at night and thinking about being a missionary or a preacher or full-time race driver. Well, the time came where I could do all three. But you go through a period of life, like I said, 16, 18, and then there's a period of life where I just kind of forgot about God. But I remember taking a shower in 73, and we were in a tight race with Mike Durr for the IMCA championship, and I remember kind of my hair falling out. But I remember thinking, well, if I got hurt, or maybe even worse than that I'd be okay, probably be okay. And then I fell completely away from the Lord for about a year. And then when I came back, he came back and he just pretty much let me know what he wanted me to do. And I had the signs made to put on the side of the car, they were stick-on material. Permanent stick-on, and I carried in the racetrack for three races, not being sure that's what he wanted before I put them on. Once they were on, they were on.
And you won that championship in '73.
Yes, I did, yes.
Champion.
So that felt like a confirmation that what you were doing was the right thing.
Well, that was just hard fought. Mm. I won one championship in '63 and then '73. '69, I was IMCA Rookie of the Year, which was, a step. And then in '80, I went to ARCA and I was Rookie of the Year there. And almost won the championship over there. They led the points pretty much all summer. And they had a double points race. They never had that. Wasn't even on the schedule. Over at Flat Rock, Michigan. And I went over there in a 75 lapper because they were celebrating 75 years at the track. And during that race, they had a caution with about 15 laps to go. And the right front tire went down. And when we changed, I pulled back on the racetrack and one of the cars went by and just took the right front wheel right off the car. But there's double points, and we went to a race shop and fixed the car up and run, I think, Toledo, Ohio the next day. Anyway, I set new track record. Wow. Ended up running third in that race. But anyway, just things don't always go the way they're supposed to. Anyway, ended up fourth in season points in ARCA by, the 10 points separating the first four of us. It was that close of a race. Had I not had that flat tire, or had it been a single points race, like all the rest of them, I would have won the championship. But it is what it is. Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of dual points racing.
No, well, especially when they didn't.
Yeah.
No, that's not. But it is. Yeah. Had we finished, I was running third, easy third. Why, I'd have sewed it up. But the tire, and I had the caution not come out. I would. Yeah. They run 2 or 3 minutes. Go to the flat race. We'd have been 4 minutes. We'd have been done. Yeah. But it is, just. Eric, one of those things.
Back then, today, in today's racing world, like that you see IMCA racetracks. So a racetrack will be sanctioned with IMCA, and their weekly races are IMCA sanctioned races. Back when these guys were racing, there wasn't any IMCA tracks. IMCA was a traveling series.
Yeah.
So like they would go to the Nebraska State Fair or up to Milwaukee, or they'd go to hit a lot. I don't know how many state fairs were on the IMCA schedule.
Well, back when Raymond were going, they ran about 40 races a year. But back then, they built their own cars, but they just pretty much had stock motors they run, and they just carried a spare motor. But when we went to sanctioned tracks, then you had maybe a dozen cars that went to every race, and then a bunch of locals would show up. But I'm up at Spencer. I think we started 32 cars up there one day, which quite a few on a half-mile track.
What was it? This is kind of backing up a little bit, but what was it like racing with your brother?
That's what was
the Was the competition level between the two of you really high? Did you race him just the same as you did everybody else?
I think it was higher against him, and in the same way with him against me. We just wanted to beat each other.
So you really made each other better.
Well, probably so, yeah. We went up to, I think, Columbus Junction. One day they had a practice up there, and just he and I were up there. We run side by side for about 15 laps up there, and both cars were torn up when we loaded them.
They both came home and tore up cars.
Yeah,
just the two of them.
It was practice.
Yeah, but I mean, we were having at it, but yeah, that's the way it was. They, I actually beat him more than he beat me back in the jalopy days, and but racing was a lot of fun, and even we had more fun probably than anybody else, because we had an old bus that we camped in and pulled a race car behind, and we just traveled down the road, and Linda, my wife, would cook supper and we'd all eat, or once in a while we'd stop and maybe grab a pizza. And I remember up at Burlington one night when we were going somewhere and we stopped and getting pizzas, and we were running back to the camper and somebody fell on I remember a pizza box sliding down the street there, and somebody grabbed it and picked it up and run on the bus. And then I also remember going up to Wisconsin Dells. On the way up to Wausau, we left a day early just to kind of vacation, and we were riding the go-karts up there, and they finally asked us to leave.
Because you're ruining the golf carts.
Yeah, we were bumping into each other and carrying on.
Can I ask, how did the community respond to your success or your career?
I don't really know.
Did people attend the races?
Well, a lot of people did, but I mean, don't know. You have a certain amount of people that that went, but as far as the community, I don't know. I know that we were somewhat famous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Keokuk drivers, we haven't really talked about that either.
Yeah, you're right there on his shirt.
Again, these are all cars from Keokuk. And
that's my Murata with Jesus Saves on it.
I saw the picture. Yeah, Dave slipped me a picture of you standing in front of it.
The all the way through with Dick Hutcherson, Ron Hutcherson, Don White, Ernie Durr, Ramo, you and Lim, it just the competition, how good the drivers were here from Keokuk. People actually, I think some tracks they got tired of you guys winning.
Yeah,
they got frustrated because these guys had come into every state fair. In '64, I cannot remember the number of the races, but I think there was 56 races on the schedule in '64 in IMCA, and all of them were won by Keokuk drivers.
I think maybe there was 2 or 3 that wasn't.
Really?
I think Lenny Funk won 1 or 2.
How?
And somebody else, but they won. I'm thinking maybe the year before they won them all, but 1 year. But back thinking about Dick Hutcherson, Dad and Jack Tucker had this car called the Little Red Devil, and it was painted red. And Jack Tucker was leading the race out there, and one of Dick Hutcherson's crewmen was out there waving him on. Because Dick Hutcherson's car was the same kind of car. It was red. Well, the next week, Hutcherson's car come back with a white top. Because his crew. And then I also remember that Ramo Stott got into it with Bill Arnold up at Sportsman's Park there. And Arnold told Ramo he better warm up his welder. And the next week, Ramo took a ride. And there was a big-time flip, yeah.
There was a lot more of that, wasn't there?
Yeah, a lot of that went on, yeah.
So the rules weren't as developed as they are now. So there were some dirty plays on the track.
Well, yeah, but there still is today. And if you've been involved in a little bit, you can see it easier than like you could see it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, some of that stuff is not quite as much accidental as they put on, yeah. But
wow.
You know, and I know you're not familiar with this, but Ernie and Don, they were brother-in-laws.
Right.
And Ernie Durr and Don White, and I think that same level of competition between them two that you have with Liam, they raced so hard against each other in their early days that I think that same thing happened with them. It made them just.
Yeah, you know, they have some stories back, you know, of back then they used to drive their cars to the racetrack, tape off the headlights and stuff, race them, and then drive them home. And most of the time they got to drive them home. But but one or two of them got picked up somewhere down south somewhere, and I think they ended up spending the night in jail. I remember reading a story or something about it a while back and stuff, but yeah, they were pioneers to the sport. Nobody had haulers in those days, you know, and even like I said, that's why so many guys parked their cars over at Peter's Dairy, because they could just drive them back and forth across the field to the racetrack. And along about 6 o'clock, you'd see a whole string of them going over.
Trailers weren't that popular.
No, well, and even then they started using tow bars.
Yeah.
Hardly anybody had a trailer back then.
So Durr and White, were they older than you? Was that a generation before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were, Don would have probably been, Ernie would have probably been close to 100 right now. He was 92 or 3, I think, when he passed. And he's been gone several years now.
Who were your, I mean, I think we're touching on this. Who were your inspirations? Who were the people that you looked up to that helped inform the way that you raced?
Well, probably just as much my dad as anybody, because my dad had co-owned a couple cars and stuff, friends with Raymond on that. But when I was a kid, I went to some races with Raymond and Judy and that, and like he had an uncle that lived over on the way to Memphis, and there's a Shady Oaks or some kind of a little bitty racetrack out in the woods over to Memphis. Raymond went over there a couple of times, and then the guys were running on the half mile there at the fairgrounds, and they had a wooden fence on the inside, and a couple of those cars come home with a 1x6 or 1x4 all the way through the car and right beside the driver. In fact, one guy had his pants torn by one of those boards.
Wow, close calls.
Yeah, real close calls. In fact, I think that Jerry McCready actually ended up with a steel plate in his head from a bad crash over to Memphis.
His cars were so dangerous compared
if Jerry's listening, you know, that might inspire him to come on and talk to you, Dave. But anyway, Jerry just turned 90 a week or two ago.
Maybe you should tell the story wrong so that he can come on and set the story straight.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah.
A couple of things I thought of. One, how much different the cars were at first. You didn't really need any special parts. If you could kind of mention, the one thing I really love about looking at some of your first cars is that they have my uncle GB Ellison's name on them.
Yeah.
And tell us about GB.
GB was a good boy. He a good old boy. He I don't know, for some reason, I'm just a good kid. I really was. I mean, but he knew GB really liked me, and he said anything in the junkyard. You know, and you think, junkyard, but Man, that's gold.
Yeah.
You know,
That's what
and,
everybody
go
used.
down and get whales.
You're piecing your car together with that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And no, he sponsored me all the way up till I went in the Army. And but he was a race fan, and but
First race I ever went to, that's who took me, my Uncle GB.
yeah.
But you, the other thing I wanted to mention was you had mentioned earlier about working for Ray Nichols, and kind of explained to Erica, Ray Nichols was like the builder for Ford and Mopar.
Well, no, he had
Worked
been
for
Pontiac.
Pontiac, worked for both, didn't he?
Yeah, he had Pontiacs, and then at the end of '63, Pontiac pulled out their sponsorship, and Chrysler came in, and Ramo had built a '63 Plymouth on his own with a 426 wedge in it, you know, because they didn't have the Hemi till '64. So anyway, Nichols and so Ernie and Ramo both had '64 Plymouth, and then in '65 Ernie had to go to a Dodge, which wasn't much different.
Right.
And then Don was running a factory car out of Nichols. So three of the Keokuk drivers were factory drivers for Chrysler.
And Ray's shop was in
Nichols was Highland, Indiana, or there were two towns right beside each other.
But Ray, the first reunion we had, the first Keokuk race reunion, Ray made it back.
Yeah.
Ray Nichols came to that reunion.
Yeah.
And he just, if you look up Ray Nichols Google, there's an awful lot of history in there.
Yeah, I don't remember. I'm not too sure that Ray wasn't here even when Annie Granatelli come into town.
You might have been. That was before when they had the banquet down the bottom of the
Right.
hotel.
That was in.
Yeah.
That was
in the
19 probably 1970.
Was it?
Yeah, it was either in the fall of '70, but I think it was in wintertime there in fall of '69, or this winter of '70. I'm pretty sure it was 1970. I have the plaque on the wall, you know, of that they gave us race drivers, and I have a picture that was in the paper of all of us drivers being around her. But I kind of think Ray was here, but it might have been just sitting around Annie Granatelli.
GB took me to that banquet. I was 13, and I still got the program from this racers banquet that they had, and I'll tell you though, those were really special times.
Yeah.
To see what went on then.
I want to ask a metaphysical question about cars. When is a Pontiac no longer a Pontiac? Like you said, you're using these Dodge cars, but you're putting in different engines, and you're kind of Frankensteining these cars together.
Well,
really true
now that's prior to going in like IMCA. You had to run, you know, everything supposedly stock, you know, and stuff. But back in '81, when we went to Daytona, Davey Allison had one of the Davey was going to run a Matador, one of Bobby's cars, in the race, and they blew two of them Matador motors up, and they were putting a Chevrolet motor in it, and ARCA let them run it down there, but because of the name, you know.
The ARCA series is really unique, Erica, as far as it's still true today. To run ARCA, you run Daytona, and they still run Talladega.
Yeah, but they have a lot more of the high-speed tracks now.
They do, and then they'll have some half miles that you'll run, some smaller half-mile tracks. They have two races on the ARCA schedule on dirt, both in Illinois, the Illinois State Fair in Springfield, and the Southern Illinois in DuQuoin are still ARCA races. So to win the ARCA title, you have to run the biggest track in the country all the way down to
very versatile racers.
Dirt track in Springfield.
It's like a skill. You have to be a skilled driver, not just a fast driver.
Yeah, when we were like in ARCA, we ran Flat Rock, Michigan. The track there was as flat as this desk, and it was not even a big quarter of a mile. It was closer to a fifth mile. And you go from there, and then you go to Talladega. That's a little over 2.5 miles. You know, and
you could really get some speed there.
Well, yeah, we were running about 230 down the straightaway, and when you're averaging 205 around the place, and you don't lift, you run wide open.
Things have changed so much today that a lot of these bigger teams, when they go to those 2 dirt races, they'll have a dirt car. They'll have a car just for those couple races. You guys didn't have that, did you?
No.
It's like a set of golf clubs.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much put on a shaker screen and dirt tires. And I changed the size of the sway bar.
Like putting chains on tires when it's snowing, basically.
Yeah.
So, what do you have a favorite kind of track?
I didn't really like Milwaukee because the car had to be just right to get around it good. And I remember running Milwaukee and a 200 miler, maybe a 250 miler over there, being about halfway through and the car wasn't working. And I remember singing "Onward, Christian Soldier" to myself, you know, because it was just a long day. We finished, but I mean, we just weren't competitive. But if the car wasn't good, the car wasn't good. And the same happens today, especially these guys with Kyle Busch, one of the best there is, running like junk right now.
Yeah, no doubt.
And because they just can't get the car right.
And man, that Milwaukee race, those races up in Milwaukee, they were so popular with Keokuk people. There'd be hundreds of people from Keokuk travel to Milwaukee. My mom and dad, we'd go up there and go to the races at Milwaukee, and you just couldn't believe there'd be a huge section of people there from Keokuk.
It was a big race, and of course the fair was going on, and it was a nice fair. And my wife was able, when we went to the races, in fact, the one year we put 2 mopeds on the front of the trailer, and my wife and a friend of hers would take off and ride around the fair and stuff on the mopeds. And
that's the way to do it. That's a hack. Yeah.
My wife, she really worked hard getting food and stuff packed in. I remember watching out the front window of the house and how hard she worked getting ready to go. And
I'm going to have to find that picture of you in the bus with her looking out the next window.
I got that.
That's a
I wish
picture.
I'd have brought my scrapbook.
Yeah, that's a great picture.
Yeah.
Well, we're only on part 1.
Yeah.
So if you're okay with it,
we
need to schedule a time for part 2.
Oh, we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.